Polls are beginning to close in Texas as the last voters cast their ballots in the party primaries. It's special primary night coverage from the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio, with support from CASA, court-appointed special advocates, making a difference for children in foster care.
I'm David Brown.
And I'm Laura Rice. The most talked about race is for U.S. Senate. Republican John Cornyn is facing challengers, and the Democratic side could be neck and neck.
Parties are also choosing their candidates for Texas governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and more. We'll be watching as the numbers roll in.
We'll also be hearing from reporters across the state about turnout and about what they're hearing from voters.
It's live primary night coverage from this station and the Texas Standard.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. As the U.S.-Israel war in Iran widens, the death toll for U.S.
No matter where you are, if you're in line at your polling place, you can still cast a ballot in the primary elections. This is special live primary night coverage from the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown.
And I'm Laura Rice. We'll be here with you on your radio or audio streaming service tonight, but we're also streaming video today at texasstandard.org. Yeah, so you can watch along with us from the Texas Standard studio as the polls close and results begin to come in.
The midterms are often billed as a referendum on the party in power, that being the Republicans, both on the national level and, of course, here in the Lone Star State. But as these are primaries, we'll have to wait a bit longer to see how this storyline shakes out. The question tonight really is which candidates the GOP and the Democrats put forward for the general election.
That's right, and the race on both sides of the aisle that's gotten the most attention is that for U.S. Senate. Longtime incumbent John Cornyn is facing two prominent Republican challengers. Each are jockeying for the position of the most Trump-approved conservative, though Trump has not endorsed anyone in that race.
For the Democrats, it's U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett, who has branded herself with tough talk, and fellow progressive state representative James Tallarico, who's positioned himself as a bit more moderate and appealing to independents, perhaps.
We'll be checking in this hour with reporters who are stationed at watch parties across Texas in these races and beyond. But we're going to start with Kaylee Hunt, Williamson County reporter for our home station, KUT. Kaylee, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, there's a reason we're picking on you here in Williamson County, and that's because Williamson was one of the Texas counties, one of just a few that changed things up this primary election day. Can you tell us what they did?
That's right. So the past 10 years, voters in Williamson County have been able to cast a ballot at pretty much any location located throughout the county. Now, this year, the county's Republican Party decided that they no longer wanted to offer that program, which is called countywide voting, and instead wanted voters to be assigned a neighborhood polling place. That means you can only cast your ballot at that specific polling place. And so, there was a lot of confusion today as I was traveling from polling location to polling location among both Democrats and Republicans, I have to note. It wasn't just, one party or the other. Folks had been so used to having countywide polling for the past 10 years or so that this was a big change.
So we know Dallas County also did this. Dallas County actually made the decision late this evening to extend voting to 9 p.m. to make sure that voters could get to their proper precincts and be in line and cast a ballot. Williamson County, it's 7 o'clock and polls are closing unless you're in line at the right precinct. Is that our understanding?
That's right. That's my understanding of the situation right now. I will say, though, Laura, I did talk to Kim Gilby, the Williamson County Democratic Party chair, just 15 minutes before polls actually closed at 7 p.m. And she said that they were working on trying to file a lawsuit in time to extend those poll hours here in Williamson County, but that they couldn't get a hold of a judge. So it looks like they didn't get a hold of a judge in time. And so as a result, polls have closed.
Kaylee Hunt is Williamson County reporter for our home station, KUT in Austin. Kaylee, thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Here in the studio, we want to introduce a couple of guests who are going to help us throughout the night. To my direct right, we have Scott Braddock. Scott Braddock, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing here in Texas.
Howdy. Editor at quorumreport.com and a star of radio and film all over the great state.
You hear him often here on the Texas
traveling the state the last couple of weeks, covering this primary, putting as many as about 180,000 miles on my truck over the last decade or so, covering these races and checking out every corner of the state and figuring out what's going on. Didn't surprise me that they couldn't get Republican state district court judges on the phone in Williamson County.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, but they found some Democratic state district court judges in Dallas to keep their polls open.
Interesting, yeah.
Editor at quorumreport.com for the last 10 years and host of the brand new podcast, Quorum Report Radio. Check it out wherever you like to listen to podcasts.
Bethany Albertson is an associate professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin. Tell us a little bit about your interests, Bethany.
I'm a political scientist at UT Austin. I study emotion. I study election attitudes. I get to teach lots of awesome UT undergrads and graduate students.
Scott was telling us all about his truck. Tell us about yours. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I have a bicycle.
Oh, well, there we are. So, what are you looking for tonight?
What am I looking for? Well,
All about the U.S. Senate race? Is that going to be? I guess that's got to be big kahuna.
It's just so exciting that we have competitive races on both sides.
You were talking a little bit earlier about when was the last time we had a competitive race on the
It's
Democratic side?
Really hard. I put
Statewide
this out on social media asking friends when was the last time, and people brought up things like Beto O'Rourke, and he didn't face a really competitive primary. And so if we want to see last time that there was a competitive primary for Texans, for Democrats in Texas, you could go to the 2008 presidential election. Right there, Texas Democrats had a choice that mattered. But the fun answer that one of my friends offered up was 2010, Kinky Friedman and Jim Hogan, and that would be, oh no, that's 2014.
2014.
Yeah.
All right. And that was a pretty close race, too.
38-37.
Scott, we've seen some closer races on the Republican side, but I think tonight there's a whole lot of drama, especially in that Senate race. We got to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Republican race is more interesting than the Democratic one because that's probably who's going to be the senator.
Well,
given the history of Texas, I always like to say the Republican primary in this state is...
We're not taking any of that for granted, folks.
Sure, no,
just
that's
for the
true.
record.
No, that's true. But until proven otherwise, the Republican primary in Texas is the most consequential election on the planet that almost nobody votes in. Right, because you'll have 2-3 million people vote or so in an average Republican primary.
It's not going to be that way this year.
Sometimes less than that, but they do set the tone for a state of 31 million Americans, right? And the policy prescriptions. And if you look at who's running, it is the MAGA wing of the Trump Republican Party versus the MAGA wing of the Trump Party. You have a lot of folks trying to say that, oh, John Cornyn, he's more moderate, and he's someone who's the establishment. But I don't agree with that. I mean, he has been on the Trump team since Trump came in. He votes with Trump 99% of the time, and he was also the Republican whip, rounding up in the Senate all of those votes for judicial appointments, et cetera, for President Trump. He's been on the team, but you have a lot of Cornyn fatigue, if you will, among Republicans. They've gotten tired of a senator who's been there for more than 2 decades, and they're looking for something different. And it's interesting to me that you have within the Democratic and Republican parties, all the polling shows this, both the campaign polling as well as the public polling that we've seen, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, they're looking for fighters. What they prioritize above everything else on the Democratic side, they want someone who's going to fight, quote, Republican extremism. On the Republican side, they want someone who's going to stand with President Trump. So you do have, it looks like, the party's on track to nominate the only 2 people out of a state of 31 million folks, the only 2 people who could possibly lose to each other, and that'd be Ken Paxton and Jasmine Crockett.
Well, that's Scott Braddock's take here. Let's talk to you about this just a bit, Bethany. Looking at the Democratic side of this U.S. Senate race, we have a couple of people who I've seen this described in an interesting way. James Tallarico from Austin. Of course, you have Jasmine Crockett from the Dallas area. And I was interested in how the New York Times put this. They said this is less about a difference in policy, much more about a difference in personalities and style. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a remarkably policy-free primary on both the left and the right, I think. What I think they're offering up on the Democratic side is different models of turnout, right? Both candidates are offering us a vision of how they could flip Texas, which is no small feat. Decades of one-party rule in Texas, right? Tallarico's giving us this model of turning out previously moderate or independent voters, maybe winning over some Republicans, whereas Crockett doubles down on the base, says she's a fighter and that she can make this election work by energizing Democrats.
The map has been redrawn, and Democrats are on the defense. We're talking about what's happening with these congressional races, all of these seats up for grabs in November. Tell us what are there any particular races you're looking for, or a broader theme that you're looking for, Scott?
In those congressional races, I'm watching South Texas very closely. The districts that were drawn, the newly drawn districts south of Interstate 10, will be competitive in the fall. When that map was ushered through the legislature last year in quite controversial fashion, the author of the map, Representative Todd Hunter, the former chairman of the redistricting committee, he kept saying throughout the entire thing, because he comes from the coastal bend, South Texas, he knows it's competitive down there. He kept saying, these are not guaranteed to be Republican seats. He kept saying, look, candidates are going to have to run their races, raise their money, get out the vote. And so I think what to watch for tonight is whether those not more quote-unquote moderate Republicans win in those districts, in those primaries. I think the way to think about it is which ones are the most electable in South Texas, can make the argument to some of those swing voters that'll be interested in the November election for sure. But I was taking a look at some of the early vote, and this will tell you a lot about what's happening with those maps with South Texas in the South Texas counties, from the Gulf of Mexico up to Webb County. So Laredo back down to Brownsville.
Right.
The backlash to President Trump already looks really significant. In the first round of voting that we saw in the early vote, those 2 weeks, Democrats outvoted Republicans 103,000 to 25,000.
Wow.
And we've had all that coverage over the last few years about how President Trump and Republicans have made up so much ground in South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley and up to Laredo. But the fact is that I think Republicans are aware of this. That vote went toward President Trump. It didn't necessarily go to Republicans writ large, right? That they were very sympathetic to some of the arguments that President Trump was making. But the arguments I've been hearing lately from some very nervous Republicans, they've been saying this: it's not just the ICE raids that we're seeing on television and ICE shooting Americans on the streets of Minnesota. It's also the fact that ICE has been setting up more checkpoints in South Texas in some of these communities, and some Trump voters, people who voted for the president, are asking their Republican representatives, why are they doing this in our communities now?
We're talking with a couple of very special guests here at the Texas Standard. We have Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report, host of the Quorum Report Radio; Bethany Albertson, associate professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin; and joining us behind the big, I suppose you could say, the podium here is Laura Rice, co-host here at the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown, and there's a whole lot more statewide coverage of primary night in Texas. It's live primary night coverage from the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown.
And I'm Laura Rice. We have reporters fanned out at watch parties for Texas Senate candidates. Let's check in with them, starting with Blaze Gainey, who covers politics for the Texas Newsroom. He is at the watch party for James Tallarico. Blaze, good to speak with you.
Yeah, nice to speak with you as well.
All right. Wherever you are, you found a quiet spot. Where are you, and where is Team Tallarico headquartered tonight?
Team Tallarico is headquartered at Emo's in Austin. I actually stepped outside. They have music going inside.
I
And
was going to say, that's a concert
people.
venue, yeah.
Exactly. It's a lot of people talking and, the happenings of the night. They have the election results up on TV, so you hear little cheers when the results went up. And just recently, it looks like Tallarico took a little lead over Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it looks like a pretty lively night. People are still pouring in, actually, and it's getting pretty packed.
I was going to say, so the mood sounds, I was going to ask about it, but you've described it pretty well. It sounds optimistic. It sounds happening. They're having a good time, it sounds like, at least at the moment.
Yeah, I've talked with a couple of people, and they're really excited. Most people at this point have been like volunteers, but I think more donors and whatnot are here as well. So it's a private event, so it's not like just open to the public, but still a lot of people here, obviously supporting of Representative Talarico. And I don't know if you can hear. I just stepped back in briefly so you can hear it maybe in the background, but it is a pretty lively event.
Yeah. So tell me about the results that we have so far, because it's got to be early voting, and it's got to be small. It's only 7:21. Polls still closing across Texas, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, anything right now is way too early to really make a determination. You have only a few counties that have actually reported. I think the last I saw was Collin County, and it looks like Talarico had about 57% of the vote. But once again, that's just early votes, and I think it's just about 50% or so of the votes in. So there will still be more results as, throughout the night. And, looking anytime between now and maybe 9 o'clock is too early to really determine what will be the end result.
Polls in the Democratic Party, the Senate race, have really gone up and down, but I would say that they've primarily favored Crockett. But recently, Talarico got a lot of attention over this dust-up over his canceled appearance on the Colbert report. What are you hearing about that? Is that something that you have a sense that really raised his profile at a very important time as early voting was about to happen or going on?
Yeah, I mean that video on YouTube came out essentially like as polls were opening the night before, I believe, and it definitely boosted his profile. I think what'll be hard to tell is whether or not it really changed people's minds. I think most people at that point either had their mind made up, but I did talk with somebody earlier this morning at polling location, and they said, I mean, as they were in there voting, they were still trying to make the decision whether or not to vote for Crockett or Talarico. The thing is, both candidates are, most people believe they'll vote the same on issues, but it's more so how they will get along with the other representatives and other senators that really matters to them, because they want to see change happen. And, they know putting somebody in there that can work with people will be the best opportunity for that to happen.
And so they see James Talarico as somebody who could be a bit more appealing down the center?
Exactly. Yeah. Most people see him as somebody that can at least talk with the Republicans and get them to maybe, vote in the favor that he'd like. Although, I've heard the same for people who support Crockett. They said that even though she's fiery, it doesn't mean that she doesn't work across the line. Even Senator John Cornyn has said he's worked with Crockett in the past. Now, he may not be saying that now while on the campaign, but he's worked with her on several bills. So, this whole thing about, them not necessarily being able to work across the line is not really true once they get to work in D.C.
Blaise Gainey covers politics for the Texas Newsroom. Blaise, thank you so much. And a quick correction, I'm apparently 10 years out of date. Of course, Stephen Colbert hosts The Late Show these days.
That is correct.
And you are listening to special live coverage from the Texas Standard. I want to take a look at some quick early numbers here, looking at the U.S. Senate race on both the Democratic and the Republican side. We have early votes coming in from the counties surrounding Dallas County, a couple of central Texas counties, and some in deep South Texas, so actually along the coastal bend. We have Jasmine Crockett ahead of James Talarico, 55% to 43.7%. On the Republican side, it looks like in roughly the same counties, although some early votes coming in from Dallas County. We have John Cornyn at 44.7%, Ken Paxton at 38.7%, Wesley Hunt at 13.3%. If this keeps up, we may see runoff. In fact, that was something that a lot of folks were expecting. While we were talking about the Democratic side, let's turn to Jasmine Crockett's watch party. Dylan Duke is a reporter for our partners at KERA in North Texas, and Dylan's with her campaign now. Welcome to the Standard.
Hi, great to be here.
Where are you exactly?
So I am in Club Viva near downtown Dallas, and actually Jasmine Crockett is not here yet. Even though polls are closed in most part of the state, they're open till 9, so things are actually just getting started here.
Yeah, Crockett going into this race, someone many thought to have a bigger name recognition. Congressman Colin Allred, who was initially running for Senate, decided to drop out and endorse her. How's that played out with voters? Any indication from your conversations and what you're seeing in these numbers?
Nobody's really mentioned numbers specifically. I mean, really people are just beginning to roll in here, even media and her staff, and they're really just focused on getting Crockett here and setting things up. Which, again, the polls are open till 9 here in Dallas County, so I guess that's to be expected.
What are you hearing on that front? Have they said when Jasmine Crockett might actually take the stage, or what?
No word on when she's going to be here yet, but she is about 10 minutes away in South Dallas in Fair Park with that House District 33 Democratic candidate, Colin Allred, talking a little bit about how, some Democratic voters in Dallas County had trouble kind of finding where to vote. And so they actually coordinated with the Democratic Party chair here in Dallas County to ask a county judge to extend voting till 9. So she did a press conference over there at around 6:30, and so we're still waiting to hear back when she's going to actually get here.
Have you had a chance to see much of the turnout at the polls today, or you pretty much been saving your energy for tonight?
So I was there bright and early at 7, 8 a.m. and it was very, very high turnout, at least where I was at near East Dallas, and very diverse. I saw the full spectrum of Dallas there. I mean, young, old, middle-aged, black, white, Asian, Latino. I mean, I saw everybody there, and I can tell you that there was a lot of bustle, and it was very early. So people going in to vote before work.
Well, the saying is that Texans don't like to vote in primaries. Doesn't sound like that this year. Sounds like it was a very active at the polls.
Yeah, I heard people say, saying they wanted to vote, because of immigration, because of the climate. But I heard a lot of people just say they felt like it was their duty to vote, and they wanted to have their voice heard, and they didn't want to, feel left out of the process.
How closely do you think folks are following this race up in North Texas? Has this been on lots of folks' minds, or has this sort of more been in the background?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we have international press here, so I think everybody's so aware of how this is being watched around the country and maybe around the world, so we're all following very closely.
Dylan Duke reports for KERA in North Texas, and we'll be checking in with him as the night progresses. There's a whole lot more live coverage from the Texas Standard as the evening continues. Don't touch that dial.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. Polls are officially closed across most of Texas. Voters on Mountain Time still have another 30 minutes. Those in line before 7 p.m. local time will still be allowed to cast their ballot. Texans have turned out to vote in large numbers this election cycle, with early voting figures showing higher turnout than usual for primaries and midterm years. Several high-profile races are drawing voters to the polls. That includes the U.S. Senate race, where incumbent John Cornyn is working to fend off Republican challengers. There's also a hotly contested Democratic Senate primary. University of Houston political scientist Brandon Rottinghouse says while a lot of the focus is on urban areas, other parts of the state could help decide those races.
I'm watching the Valley because this is where a lot of the Latino vote is. And like I said, they tend to break, for Democrats, but which Democrat they break for will be pretty telling here. I'm also looking at suburban counties, places like Hayes County that are outside of Austin. It's big, it's growing. You've got a lot of retirees who have come to Texas.
In El Paso, polling places were busy all day. Casey Stell brought her toddler with her to vote.
I know Texas often votes red, but I'm hoping that maybe enough of the bigger cities are dissatisfied with the way things are that maybe things can start to move in a different direction.
On the opposite side of the state, in Brazoria County, south of Houston, Tennessee transplant Jessie Bradley voted in Texas for the first time. She found the process quite difficult, mainly because of the number of races on the ballot.
Oh, it was a lot. It was a lot to select from, which was very unusual, you know.
Bradley said several candidates campaigned at her local church, which helped her learn more about who to vote for. Meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has issued a legal opinion regarding the role of election inspectors. Texas Public Radio's Marian Navarro explains.
Many state-appointed election inspectors and poll watchers are at polling locations on this primary election day. Paxton's legal opinion clarifies the legal authority inspectors have to gather evidence to ensure election integrity under the Texas Election Code. Paxton says they are exempt from a ban on taking photos and recording images within 100 feet of a voting station when conducting official duties. The opinion also says poll watchers must not be banned from observing the counting or movement of mail-in ballots. Legal opinions do not have the force of law and are not legally binding in court.
And in Dallas County, Democratic polling locations are now open until 9 p.m. Dallas County Judge Stacey Williams signed an order to keep those polls open 2 additional hours past closing time after hundreds of voters showed up at the wrong Dallas County polling locations due to confusion about where they could vote. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. And Mose Buchel with our home station KUT is at the watch party for Senator Cornyn. Mose, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Laura?
I can hear you. So where are you exactly? Where is Senator Cornyn's party?
So we're at the Marriott Hotel in downtown Austin, but I got to say, this is not a party.
Oh.
I found out as soon as I showed up here. This is just simply a kind of media availability. They say they're going to make the senator available once some of the results start coming in. So, yeah, I'm at a hotel in downtown Austin. I kind of assume there might be some type of election night event, but it's really a bunch of reporters in a room waiting for Senator Cornyn to show up and answer some questions, maybe sometime after 8, you know.
Well, I that sort of sets a tone in and of itself, does it not?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I spoke with a guy, helping to set this up for the campaign, and he said that they are waiting for the runoff election for the election night event. So that suggests that they are pretty much expecting this to go to a runoff, and maybe we'll get a party then. Well, we'll see.
Well, which is not a position we usually, or typically, I should say, see incumbents in. You know, someone who has been in statewide office as long as Senator Cornyn, but here he is with challengers. I don't want to say to his right, but certainly with him on the right. What are we seeing as far as results so far? Have you watched that or been able to check and see?
No, not yet. I haven't seen any of the early results coming in, but Cornyn has, has, I don't think, lost an election, in his political history. And so, yeah, indeed, this is certainly a new situation for him to find itself in.
Uncharted territory, especially this far along in the career. You know, Donald Trump did not endorse a candidate in this Texas Senate race. He said something like, "They're all great guys," or something like that, right? So, tell us a little bit about who he's facing and where Cornyn stands in that mix.
So what we have is, like you said, Cornyn's the incumbent senator. He is running for his fifth term in office, and a long-standing figure in Texas politics. He is facing a very tough challenge from Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is running as a party activist to Cornyn's right. Like you said, I mean, they both would they both would claim that mantle, but that is how Paxton is campaigning and has garnered a lot of support from the party base and from presumed primary voters, with that message and with his history here in the state. And then we also have Wesley Hunt. We have a third candidate here, which, again, creates the calculus for a runoff, right? I mean, if nobody cracks the 50%, then there we go. We got almost a few more months of this, at least between two candidates.
I was going to ask about this, okay, because I feel like we've mentioned the possibility of a runoff a couple of times in the program, and we ought to explain exactly how we get there. And so in order to win a primary outright, it's what, 50% plus one or something like that?
Essentially, yeah. Somebody needs to crack 50% to call it a night or to call it an election. And with the math and the polling where they're at with these three candidates, it just seems very unlikely that any of the two front runners, that would be Paxton and Cornyn, are going to be able to do that. And so that would, by necessity, create runoff conditions. But what we will learn from, as the results come in, is which candidate might be best positioned. The makeup of the electorate in a runoff primary election is different from even in a primary election. Of course, they're both different from the general election. And so that might suggest that one candidate might have an easier time with the smaller amount of voters that are going to come out for a runoff election. And so you'll get a sense of who's voting, who's motivating what sections of the Republican primary electorate, and how that might translate into this next stage. Of course, if it's really, really close, if one candidate gets very close to that 50% mark, that's going to be a big suggestion that they're going to be favored.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, the incumbent's advantage usually is the name recognition. But in this case, Attorney General Ken Paxton is probably almost as well known, if not more well known than Cornyn, primarily because he's been in the news so much for the last couple of years.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and some might say for better or worse, but he has certainly been in the news. He has made a name for himself as like I said, a kind of party-based right-wing activist crusader as Attorney General. He has also been in the news for numerous scandals, that have come up throughout his political career. But he certainly has been in the public's eye and definitely has that name recognition.
Mose Buchel is a reporter at KUT in Austin. Mose, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
We're seeing the Associated Press saying an estimated almost 16% of votes coming in. At this point, John Cornyn is leading, but less than that 50% mark at about 45%. But again, still an early night. Stay with us on the Texas Standard.
It's about 40 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock Central Time, 6:40 in the Mountain Time zones, where they're still casting ballots. Joining us here in the Texas Standard Studios, Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report and host of Quorum Report Radio. We're seeing some early results trickle in. Any impressions early on, Scott?
The confusion in Dallas County and Williamson County can't be, we can't overstate how important that is, because the Dallas County vote is going to be really important.
Yeah.
And now they're not even going to wrap up their voting until 9. We're starting to see some early vote out of Harris County now, which, of course, if you think about Houston and the greater Houston region, the 8 counties there, that makes up about 1/5 of the Texas electorate. So it tells you a lot. Once you get Dallas-Fort Worth, and Houston in the mix. And I'm looking at early vote out of Houston that was just texted to me by a friend there who is a junkie for all this stuff. He had the jump on the Harris County vote. In the Democratic primary, Representative Crockett is leading Representative Tallarico 53-47 in Harris County. So that is significant. We'll watch that as it comes in. That's just the early vote. We have Election Day. I did see that in that last poll, it was the Emerson poll, the last one they did, that had Representative Tallarico in the lead. One of the interesting nuances in there was that among those who said they were going to vote on Election Day, the edge was with Representative Crockett. So we'll watch all of that very closely.
Very interesting indeed. Hey, we want to turn to the Houston bureau chief for the New York Times now, David Goodman. He is joining us from the Ken Paxton Watch Party on the Republican side of the U.S. Senate race. David, can you hear us?
Yep. Yeah, I got you.
Where is this Paxton event exactly, and what are things like there?
So this event is at a Marriott Hotel in Uptown Dallas, and the mood is upbeat. You know, the folks that I talked to who came out are optimistic. They think that, Attorney General Paxton is in the pole position here with this race, that, he may not avoid a runoff here, but that he's certainly, they believe, primed to win it during that runoff in May.
I was just listening to Laura Rice speaking with Mose Buchel, who was at the John Cornyn event, which was a non-event, actually. They've just decided to make it a press availability for John Cornyn later this evening. Sounds like the mood is somewhat more celebratory there in the Paxton camp.
Oh, this is for sure an event. They've got two bars set up on either side. There's people that have come in from surrounding counties. Yeah. It's a I wouldn't say it's a celebration yet, but it's much more of a party than it sounds like the senator is enjoying tonight.
Yeah, well, Paxton has been positioning himself as the more MAGA candidate in this race, even though President Trump didn't give him the official endorsement in the race. How do you think that's played with conservative voters in Texas, or too early to know?
Well, the folks that I've spoken to, both at polling places and at events during this campaign, they weren't concerned. These are Paxton supporters. They weren't concerned about the lack of an endorsement. They seem confident that Paxton is aligned with the president, and that, they say, oh, well, the president likes all of them and didn't want to pick. And that is true, that President Trump said he likes, Cornyn, he likes Paxton, he liked Wesley Hunt as well, and didn't want to get involved. The question is whether he jumps into this runoff. And there, I think you'll see these two candidates trying to jockey for that endorsement once again. And it might come in that context when it's clear possibly who the winner is going to be, and the president can seem to have some kind of influence on that.
We all expected this, but something that John Cornyn has been doing over the past many weeks is hitting Paxton over his scandals, his affair, impeachment, that sort of thing. My gut tells me that will not have been very effective given the core of Paxton's supporters, but I'm curious what your take on it is, and whether you've seen anything that suggests that was the right move on Cornyn's part.
It's hard to understand why they believed that would work, given that most of these charges have already been known to Texas voters, and Ken Paxton has been elected statewide since a lot of these charges have been aired. So it's true that he hasn't run in a Senate race before, hasn't challenged John Cornyn, and that campaign believed that they could make a bigger deal out of it with their money on the airwaves. But the fact of the matter is that Republicans are aware of these charges, as are many Democrats, and it just isn't likely to move the needle absent something new. But just that sense of Paxton, having these scandals is sort of baked in, and many of his supporters just analogized his situation to President Trump and said, look, neither of them are perfect candidates, perfect politicians, but they are doing the things that we want to see politicians do in office, and that's why they're supporting them.
Well, conventional wisdom is that Cornyn and Paxton will be headed into a runoff. Too early to know for sure, but David Goodman is holding down the fort over at the Houston party for Ken Paxton. He's Houston bureau chief for the New York Times. David, thanks so much.
Oh, thanks. I should say it's in Dallas.
In Dallas. Thank you for the correction. You're just Houston bureau chief. That's
right. That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It is special primary election night coverage. I'm Laura Rice, and it is time to check in with the chair of the Texas Democratic Party, Kendall Scudder. Kendall, can you hear me all right?
I certainly can.
All right, what are you doing tonight, Kendall? What are your election night plans looking
Oh,
like?
you know what I'm doing. I'm just sitting in front of my computer geeking out, trying to figure out what's going on all around the state.
Well, how are you feeling? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling like it was a little overblown, or where's the needle falling?
No, I mean, I'm super excited because of how incredible our turnout has been. I mean, Democrats are going to be outvoting Republicans for the first time in over 20 years in Texas. I mean, that's really exciting, and you don't do that unless you have really exciting candidates. So, regardless of how the night goes, I'm really thrilled about what our prospects are in November because we're going to have a candidate that excites the base and drives our voters out, and that's what you have to have in a midterm in order to be successful.
Well, tell us about what we know about this Democratic turnout. Early voting typically leans Democratic. What do we know about what happened on Election Day?
I think we're still waiting on seeing those to come through, but our numbers throughout the day have shown astronomical turnout in some of our hard blue centers. So we would expect that trend of us outvoting Republicans would hold today. Regardless, we usually get outvoted in the primary 70-30. And so it's pretty remarkable that we're even having this discussion about Democrats outvoting Republicans in Texas.
Well, midterms are typically referendums on the party in power. We mentioned that earlier in the show. I mean, is that something that you think is happening here, or is there another message, or maybe it's the Senate rates that is really getting people out to vote? What's your sense of it?
I think it is a perfect storm of a lot of different things. But yes, there's certainly a referendum happening right now. Donald Trump and Greg Abbott have run our governments into the ground. There is no one who feels like their life is better off now than before either of those two took office. For the first time in American history, the poorest people in this country will pay a higher tax rate than the richest. They are not a government that works for people like us. They are constantly handing out tax dollars to the richest, treating the government and the taxpayer dollars like their own personal feeding troughs. And I think that people are sick and tired of it. They want to have a government that's full of people that are going to show up and throw down for them. And people should know that when you get a Democrat elected, we will do just that. And so that's the message we're trying to convey. I think it's resonating really well with the voters.
What are you keeping a particular eye on as we move through the night?
I think there's a lot of districts that are in play, particularly this cycle in Texas. I'll be interested to see who we nominate in the seats that Republicans tried to steal from the people of Texas in the redistricting scandal this summer. Knowing who our nominees are there will let us know kind of how formidable those races will become. Also really interested in the top of the ticket so that we can figure out exactly who's going to be spearheading our Texas Together coordinated campaign, our historic $30 million coordinated campaign here in Texas.
Kendall Scudder is the chair of the Texas Democratic Party. We will be hearing from Republicans just around the corner.
It's live coverage of primary night in Texas from the Texas Standard. Well, today's primaries kick off an 8-month marathon to the midterms, and the verdict's not just on President Trump's second term, but also on how both parties see themselves and their future. Republicans are betting on a redrawn congressional map designed to flip Democratic seats, a new map engineered to give Republicans control of more districts, and several Democratic incumbents pushed into districts already held by other Democrats. Governor Greg Abbott's name is on the ballot just once, but as the Texas Tribune put it, his influence can be felt up and down this ballot. There are 4 races in which the governor has endorsed candidates who are facing primary opponents backed by President Donald Trump. So I suppose some may see this as a kind of an early fight for the soul of the Republican Party in Texas. That may be getting too dramatic, though. Let's check in with Andy Hogue. He's the communications director for the Travis County Republican Party. Andy, welcome, and do you think I overstated it there?
Oh, no, not too much. I think midterm elections are a good time to do some soul searching.
Well, what are you seeing based on the results that have already come in with the early voting and reported results?
Yeah, well, we've got to hand it to the Democrats. Man, they are running hot. We've actually increased in Travis County here in the blueberry and Texas tomato soup here. We've actually increased our numbers by about 30% since the last midterms.
Wow.
And we're still getting swamped, statewide. So today was a good day for Republicans at the the election day polls.
Andy
But
Hogue,
still, yes.
Hogue of the Travis County Republican Party says the Democrats are running hot. You want to see that one in the headlines tomorrow, or what?
They're running hot, but I think perhaps for the wrong reasons. Perhaps it's not so much for the future of the Democrats. The Democrats are thinking there's no future. We're not really excited about President Gavin Newsom. Hello, I think we're getting an Amber Alert. Maybe that's our missing voters.
Yeah, I am
Those are our
seeing
missing Republicans.
I am seeing this Amber Alert myself here. So what about political surprises for you? Any so far tonight?
Yeah, none so far. We're except for we expected a long night in terms of counting the votes. So some counties are going to a hand count. So we're going to see a delay there. But so far we haven't really seen a lot of numbers. Just the big surprise was, of course, Republicans catching up today on a standard election day and not during early voting. So I think it's back to 50-50%, 50-50, where Republicans are split from early voting and day of voting.
You predict a runoff in that U.S. Senate race on the Senate side, on the Republican side?
Well, Team Cornyn's thinking they won't get one, but I don't see how that can be avoided. I mean, definitely going to see some runoffs up and down the ballot, and I think that's going to be one of them.
What do you, given what you've seen so far, and what your sort of hunch is, having done these election nights in the past, how do you feel about the state of the Republican Party here in Texas, and how the GOP is doing appealing to voters in this second Trump era?
Yeah, well, we're certainly the president's party. That's always been the case. He's always been our titular leader, and I think right now you've heard all the TV ads from MAGA Mays Middleton to I'm Trump supporter. That's the big deal. Are you for Donald Trump or are you not? That's the acid test.
We got to take a look at that Attorney General's race, too. That's a very interesting contest. So as we look at November and the prospects there, what do you think the party's focus should be in Texas as we move toward the general election? Do you think there's going to be some refocusing between now and, say, I don't know, perhaps May, June, July?
Well, I think a lot of it got handed to us over the weekend with the assault in Iran. I think that's absolutely going to be a big factor in the shooting downtown that seems to be at least somewhat connected, at least a sympathizer. So I think we're already seeing, we saw somewhere near 70 or 80 House members sign a letter asking to, roll back H-1B visas and curtail immigration, cold turkey for a while. So that's going to be a big issue. And secondly, I think the Democrats are hitting healthcare pretty hard. So we've got to speed it up and propose a market-friendly solution. The market-friendly solution does work. And the last time we had it in this country, doctors made house calls. So I think if we did it again, we'd be in good shape. Free market healthcare is doing a great job where it's being implemented. So we Republicans need to get on the ball on that. And thirdly, I think just more about immigration and what it means to be an American. This America First thing means a lot of different things to different people. But I think we're just going to have to find out who we are and find a winsome way to portray that. It doesn't sound like the ugly American or the dreaded xenophobe,
Andy, some very interesting perspectives. Communications Director for the Travis County Republican Party, Andy Hogue. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and keep us posted on what you see.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for all you're doing.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Audience engagement editor Wells Dunbar is watching what Texans are saying on this primary night. What you see in Wells?
Hi, David. So much to cover, just so much to take in, and it's really fascinating. Seeing lots of discussion online about just what impact keeping the polls open another 2 extra hours there in Dallas, in the Dallas County region. What impact that will have, and really it's remarkable to think how that could really tip the scales in the Democratic Senate primary, with that being Tallarico going after Crockett in her home base there. And so whether or not she sort of overperforms or underperforms in that area, the fact that those polls are going to be open a couple extra hours later, very fascinating development. On Blue Sky, DJ points to the fact that Tallarico also posted a win by 11 points in Denton early vote totals there, calling that very good for Tallarico. So fascinating to think, just as we heard earlier about the possibility of Donald Trump participating, making an endorsement in the Republican primary. These other, should it go to a runoff, I should hasten to add, just all the variables surrounding this are super fascinating. Another fascinating story, of course, we're keeping a close eye on the Republican Senate primary. Developing story here I see from KVUE, somewhat concerning. KVUE ABC Austin affiliate, they report that a masked man was arrested outside the Ken Paxton watch party in Dallas apparently with ammunition in his car, David. No threat of violence since then or anything along those lines, but people pointing to that story, noting that this concerning story coming out of the Uptown region there in Dallas. So yeah, plenty of stories we're keeping a close eye on tonight. And I just got to say, I got to give a shout out to the folks here in the YouTube chat who've been chopping it up with us here online on our video feed. For
so we
sure.
got some folks watching us online.
We sure do, and I got to give let's see if I can give some props here. Sarah Molina, she was looking for some results, and we steered her to the Secretary of State's website there. Again, it's wild to think, and back to that Republican Senate race. I'm looking at the early vote totals right now, and I see Wesley Hunt with around 14%, which is squarely in spoiler territory to take this thing to a runoff. Again, these are super early results, like 6% of 4,600 precincts reporting, or polling locations reporting. But again, pointing to the fact that this really could be going to a runoff. And you also have to think about what impact is that going to have for the Democrat who campaigns against the Republican in the fall. That's just another couple months of them beating each other up, should it come to that. So much to think about here on election night, and we're going to be sticking with it here a little while longer, I believe.
Audience engagement editor Wells Dunbar watching what Texans are saying this primary night. And hey, you can watch us. We are on YouTube. We are live streaming at texasstandard.org. I'm Laura Rice alongside David Brown. We have in-studio guests helping us with tonight's primary election night coverage, and we've been checking in with reporters across the state. Thanks so much for joining us.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Houston Public Media and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio, with support from CASA, court-appointed special advocates, making a difference for children in foster care.
I'm Laura Rice.
And I'm David Brown. Texas is one of 3 states holding primaries today. The nation watching our Senate race as a potential indicator of the moods of each party.
We'll also be watching results in U.S. House races, and parties are choosing their candidates for Texas governor and beyond.
We'll check in with reporters at watch parties across the Lone Star State about what they're hearing from voters this election night.
It's live primary coverage on air and online from the Texas Standard.
PR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In North Carolina, the matchup in one of the most competitive U.S. Senate races in the 2026 midterms is set as Democrat Roy Cooper and Republican Michael Whatley clinch their party's primary nominations today. That's according to a race call by the AP. Primaries were also held in Texas and Arkansas. President Trump says there were no evacuation plans in place for Americans in the Middle East because things happened quickly after he decided to strike Iran. Several days into the war, the State Department is now arranging some buses and evacuation flights in several countries, as NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
The State Department says it's facilitating charter flights from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, and it has helped 300 Americans leave Israel. An official says Americans should call a hotline to get on a list for potential flights and buses. The U.S. is waiving a law that requires Americans to pay back the government for such flights. The State Department says it's in touch with about 3,000 Americans so far, and about 9,000 managed to leave on their own in recent days. Many U.S. embassies in the region have sent home non-essential personnel. Iranian drones struck the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, where there was a fire, but no reports of injuries. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
Wall Street closed lower today as the U.S. war with Iran pushed gas prices back above the $3 mark. NPR's Scott Horsley reports.
The average price of gasoline jumped 11 cents overnight, topping $3 a gallon for the first time in 3 months. Low gasoline prices had been a counterweight to inflation for most of the last year, but AAA says at $3.11 a gallon, gasoline's now slightly more expensive than it was a year ago. The war with Iran has not only pushed up global crude oil prices, but also caused a spike in the cost of natural gas. That could drive up already high heating and electricity bills. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Minnesota is suing the Trump administration over its plan to withhold $260 million in Medicaid funding from the state. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin has more.
At the beginning of January, the Trump administration's health agency that runs Medicaid told Minnesota it would withhold $2 billion in federal funding over, quote, non-compliance. A few weeks later, the same federal agency said it would hold back $260 million. Now the state has sued over these actions in federal district court. The complaint outlines the ways that the state has tried to comply with the federal government's demands and points out that Minnesota's Medicaid fraud rate is 2%, while the national average is 6%. The complaint says that the Trump administration's move to withhold federal funds is arbitrary and capricious and, quote, part of the administration's pattern and practice of political punishment against the state. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. Colin Gray, the father of teenage school shooter Colt Gray, has been found guilty of murder and manslaughter. Prosecutors say he bought the then 14-year-old Colt an AR-15 style rifle and allowed him access to both the weapon and ammunition, despite warnings his son was a danger to others. The teen admitted to shooting and killing students and 2 teachers at a Georgia high school last year. Colin Gray says he didn't know about his son's plans. The trial is part of a wider push to hold parents accountable for a child's actions in school shootings. Today, the Lantern Festival was held in China and Taiwan. It's celebrated on the first full moon of the lunar calendar. And this year was a blood moon, a total lunar eclipse which darkened the moon last night for people in North America. NPR's Emily Fang has more.
Across Taiwan and China, people celebrated Yuanxiaojie, or the Lantern Festival, the 15th day of the Lunar New Year, and a time for family and friends to gather. In Taiwan's Pingxi district, people gathered as tradition and let go large paper wish lanterns on which they'd written with ink calligraphy their wishes for the year of the fire horse. And in China, people held parades and dance performances to celebrate the full moon, and people ate tangyuan, sweet glutinous rice balls often filled with sesame paste because their shape resembles the full moon, and they're eaten for good luck on Lantern Festival and the winter solstice. Emily Fang, NPR News.
Asian markets are trading lower at this hour than
No matter where you are, don't be alarmed. Yes, it's still Texas Standard Time. This is special live primary night coverage from the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown.
And I'm Laura Rice. It's now past 7 o'clock in El Paso, what would normally be the beginning of the end of voting, but instead that'll be happening on the other side of the state. Polls will be open until 9 p.m. Central in Dallas County after a last-minute legal appeal over the confusion created by that county's move to precinct-only Election Day voting for this primary.
Well, some shocking news on the Republican side in the governor's race. Yes, I'm kidding just a wee bit. Greg Abbott, AP's already calling that. He's going to be the nominee on the Republican side for governor. On the Democratic side, Gina Hinojosa seems to be holding on a considerable lead, but that one's not been called by any of the major news agencies. Meanwhile, results coming in for that U.S. Senate race that everyone's been watching. Longtime incumbent John Cornyn facing two prominent Republican challengers. And on the Democratic side, it's U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett versus State Representative James Tallarico.
And those are just a few of the races we're watching. Tonight, we're here with you on your radio or audio streaming service, but we're also video streaming today at texasstandard.org via YouTube, so you can watch along with us. We're here in the Texas Standard studios with some in-person guests and watch as results begin to come in.
And hey, we're also joined now by Angela Kocherga, the news director at our partner station KTEP in El Paso, and of course, co-host here at the Texas Standard. Angela, welcome.
Hi, David, and hi, Laura. It's so great to hear you both. What a wonderful evening.
It has been a very exciting evening, and I was watching some of your earlier reporting. I guess it was in the afternoon. It looked like they might be keeping the polls open there in El Paso past the 7 o'clock Mountain Time,
Yes.
normal time. What happened?
Well, that's exactly what happened. A district court judge this evening extended voting for an extra hour because of a technical glitch this morning in some polling places. Here in El Paso, it was not about the polling location confusion. Any voter can vote at any polling place. But what happened is some people showed up early in the morning, and the county elections office confirmed what happened is some polling places experienced a problem with this voter check-in on those electronic pads called poll pads. That's when you verify your info and you select a party before getting a ballot. But because the pads were not working, poll workers had to process that information manually, and that created delays. And so some voters left. They were on their way to work, and they just couldn't wait.
Angela, tell us a little bit about the electorate out there in El Paso that you're so familiar with and what it looked like at the primary polling stations today.
Very crowded, very brisk, and, there were just some of those places that had that problem. So by noon, the issue was resolved. But El Paso is a Democratic stronghold. We have to say that. We're right on the edge of Texas, and, of course, there are some Republicans, but predominantly Democratic. We also are predominantly Latino and a very, very young electorate. And those two groups tend to not show up, especially for midterm elections in very large numbers. So we're keeping an eye on turnout. And like the rest of the state, it looks like we have seen a substantial bump in people showing up and voting because there's a lot of interest in this primary election.
Yeah, it's not just that it's the midterms, too, which makes this such a surprise. We're talking about primaries in the midterms, right? And I'm wondering, I can't help but think that Senate race has driven a lot of the excitement, the sort of the popular buzz. Is that your sense of it too?
A lot of interest, of course, and both James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett made last-minute campaign stops here, seeking every last single vote, and so there was a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. A lot of people turned out for those rallies, and so, yeah, having a competitive race certainly has people excited.
So is it going to be a late night for you, Angela? What are you looking at?
Very late night because the issue is none of the even early results are going to be released until the polls close at 8 p.m. here, 9 p.m. Central. So, yeah, we're going to be watching to see what happens, but we hope some of those early voter results will kind of give us a sense. But we'll be up watching for all of the results, like you will, David and Laura.
Angela Kocherga is the news director at our partner station KTEP in El Paso and co-host of the Texas Standard. Angela, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, I'm doing my time math now. So 7 extended to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. In Dallas County, 7 p.m. extended to 9 p.m. Central Time. That means, I believe, that polls will close at the exact same time in Dallas County and in El Paso. And we are joined now by Paul DiBenedetto, the managing editor of our partner station, KERA in North Texas. Paul, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
All right, so Dallas polls, I spoiled the big news here for you already, but Dallas polls open until 9 p.m. now. So what does that mean for when we might see results there?
Yeah, I mean, generally, we're not going to see the results until well after that time for the Democratic primary. However, the elections department here in Dallas County has interpreted this judge's ruling that was issued earlier today to mean that only the Democratic polling places are remaining open until 9 p.m., meaning Republican polling places have been told to close at 7. As a matter of fact, I'm at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center and Library in South Dallas. It is both a Democratic and Republican polling place. I've been told that Republicans cannot vote here anymore. The polls closed at 7 o'clock for Republicans.
Wow, I could see that causing some continued confusion, however. And we were talking here with our studio guests about the closely watched U.S. Senate race, of course, between U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett and Representative James Tallarico. Tallarico, at this point leading, but, our guest made the comment, but Dallas County, we won't get those for a while. That's Jasmine Crockett territory. Is that your sense of things?
Well, I mean, Jasmine Crockett and Colin Allred, after this ruling came down from the Dallas County judge, had a press conference today where, they talked about that. I mean, Jasmine Crockett made the joke, well, I hope I'm popular in other places outside of Dallas. But I mean, I think that that probably is a real concern for some folks. I also asked Representative Crockett whether or not she was concerned. You made an allusion to this before, the sort of enthusiasm from Democratic voters during this primary. I asked, are you concerned that this enthusiasm is not going to be there come the general election after all of these sort of snafus in Dallas? She said no, and she seemed to think that it'll motivate people even more to come out in November.
Well, beyond the Senate race, which of course we've spent a good chunk of time on for good reason, what other races are you watching closely in North Texas?
I mentioned Colin Allred. We are looking closely at that congressional race where Colin Allred is coming back into politics to face Julie Johnson over here. That was made interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because he dropped out of the Senate race to jump into this congressional race, and two, because a lot of what's been happening over here has been dictated by redistricting. So that's a big one we're looking at over here. We're also looking at who's going to replace Jasmine Crockett in Congress.
Paul DiBenedetto is the managing editor of our partner station, KERA in North Texas. Paul, thank you again.
Thank you.
And here in Texas Standard Central in beautiful downtown Austin, we have Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report and host of the Quorum Report radio program. And we have Bethany Albertson as well. She's associate professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin. Well, taking a look at some of these other races that we haven't really spent a whole lot of time around, before we get to those races, I want to ask what your sort of general takeaways are, at least so far, as we are at about 8:15 Central Time, 7:15 Mountain Time. Scott, what are you seeing out there?
Well, looking at the U.S. Senate race, that, of course, is what everybody's interested in the most. And I think what was just said in that report is extremely important, because I was just checking with one of my number crunchers on exactly what percentage of the Democratic primary would be represented, not just by Dallas County, but South Dallas County, which is Jasmine Crockett's home base. And you're talking not as much as a fourth, but it's approaching that, depending on how you crunch the numbers, right? So,
wow.
So when folks look at these numbers now and they see that Tallarico has absolutely pulled ahead as more of the vote has come in, we won't know what those Dallas County numbers are, because as you said, they won't close the polls for another hour.
But wait a minute, did you just say that Tallarico has pulled ahead at least statewide right now? So
yeah,
far?
and looking at the returns that have come in so far. The last numbers I was looking at, let me get it for you. It was
very interesting, to say the least.
1 second here.
Yeah,
I've got it. My computers.
I was seeing something like.
Do you have it there?
I have it. I have it.
Is it
for you.
52-48? Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point.
52-48.
And that was with 35% of the vote in or so far. But you're looking at a lot of the vote that is still out and won't be in. If they close the polls at 9 on the Democratic side only in Dallas County. I know these big counties takes a while. We'll get some more numbers from Harris County as well later into the evening. Could be 10:30 or 11 before the Associated Press would call those races, because you don't want to do it when that many votes are still out, right?
For sure.
So yeah, I think that people, and look, I think 2 years ago in the primaries, from another one of my number crunchers, that part of the county that would be her home base is 12.5% of all votes cast in the primary 2 years ago for Democrats. So there's no way to call any of that stuff yet so far. Nowhere close, right?
Wow.
Go ahead, sorry.
Wow. Bethany Albertson, what are you seeing out there? What's standing out to you?
Just lots and lots of votes, right? And I think, if I try to take a step back and think about what's significant about what's going on in this primary, I'd note two things. One is that, right, you have Cornyn vulnerable, deeply, deeply vulnerable, and we haven't talked to the money yet, right?
Right.
But
It is I believe this was the most expensive U.S. Senate race in U.S. history.
Already,
Yeah.
right? $70 million. And, they're not spending that money as a sign of strength, right?
Right.
That they're spending that money because they think they have to. And that's a really strange thing in American politics. So I like to be able to take a step back and say, two things that strike me as really odd telling about our political moment right now is that you have an incumbent senator, right, who's been, if you think of textbook Republican senator, you would think of John Cornyn's face.
Right.
Right. He is representative.
He just looks like a senator.
Right.
He's
right,
been in
right.
office for 23 years or something,
and all that power that comes with that,
Right.
And that's not enough in Texas right now, right? And so to see an incumbent senator so vulnerable in this moment, and then also to see the tremendous turnout on both sides, but the Democratic side over, the Democratic candidates, it's a really exciting or unusual moment.
Historic. I mean, it seems like. We're going to have to do the numbers before the night is done, but I think that we'll be making history in Texas, or I should say the Texas voters will be making history, and that's particularly true on the Democratic side, it appears. Joining us in the studio, Bethany Albertson, Associate Professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin. Also with us, Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report and host of Quorum Report Radio. There's a whole lot more on this primary night. Don't touch that dial.
This is live primary election night coverage for the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice alongside David Brown. And before we get back to our special in-studio guests, we want to pay attention to some races called by the Associated Press so far tonight. Ronnie Jackson wins the Republican nomination for U.S. House in Texas's 13th congressional district. Pat Fallon wins the Republican nomination for the U.S. House in Texas's 4th. Trevor Nels wins the Republican nomination for the U.S. House in Texas's 22nd, and Brandon Gill wins the Republican nomination for the U.S. House in Texas's 26th congressional district. We have a lot of other races still yet to be called. Of course, Governor Greg Abbott already at this point projected to win the Republican nomination for governor. Don Huffines currently leading in the race on the Republican side for Texas Comptroller comptroller, beating out at the moment Kelly Hancock, who currently holds that position after Glenn Hagar left to lead the Texas A&M system. And as far as it goes for the Texas Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, the incumbent, currently in second place behind Nathan Sheets, who earned the endorsement of Governor Greg Abbott. We are turning back now to our studio guests. David, we've got a good crowd in here.
Yes, we do indeed. And we're awfully grateful to be joined by Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report, host of Quorum Report Radio, Bethany Albertson, associate professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin. I want to take a quick look at something interesting here, the Attorney General's race. Now, the Attorney General is the top lawyer in Texas, represents the state in mostly civil litigation, and I think the joke goes something along the lines of the biggest conservative law firm in all of the United States, is a way that a lot of people have characterized that AG position under Ken Paxton. Of course, Ken Paxton is foregoing election as Attorney General because he's running for U.S. Senate. 4 Republicans are running to succeed him. We have U.S. Representative Chip Roy with a lot of name recognition, State Senators Joan Huffman and Mays Middleton, and Aaron Reitz, a former top DOJ official. At last check, it looks like Mays Middleton, who positioned himself, I believe, as MAGA Mays in the TV commercials.
I have the baseball hat.
44%. That's the voice of Scott Braddock.
I collect all the merch.
Scott, what do you make of this? Mays really put on the MAGA and laid it on thick.
He did, and he did it with millions and millions of dollars behind it. Middleton poured at least about $10 million of his own money into that campaign so far. So when you've seen those television ads and heard those radio ads calling himself MAGA Mays, easy for a lot of people to roll their eyes at it, but it is what's connecting with Republican voters right now, and he's tapping into something that was talked about by one of the previous guests, which is the connection to President Trump. If you are a Republican, I think it was Andy over at the Travis County GOP talking about the idea that the gold standard right now as a Republican candidate is to be the most Trump aligned as possible.
Andy Hogue,
and Middleton is doing it for sure. And he's tapping into the fact as well, because a lot of these television ads have been attack ads against Representative Roy, and Roy has been on the opposite side of President Trump on a lot of issues, including and primarily the one that he's best known for is he was not with President Trump on January 6th. He stood with Democrats and had Democrats applauding him when Roy was screaming on the floor of the U.S. House that we need to stick to the Constitution and not overturn the election here. Of course, getting the applause of Democrats on that day will get you a lot of scorn from Republicans during a primary.
Looking at the Democratic side of this same race for Attorney General, Nathan Johnson with 47.7% of the vote, Joe Jaworski 28.8%, Tony Box at 23.5%. Not a lot of name recognition on the Democratic side, I don't think. I think it's probably safe to say.
Yeah.
Bethany, what else are you seeing out there?
What am I seeing? I just saw a bunch of votes come in from Austin, and no surprise, Talrico's Austin native, right? And so big bunch of votes for Talrico just came in. But again, we're gonna hold off because it's still early. It's early even without thinking about Dallas being put off.
Right, for sure. And something we should mention, we're getting a little bit of insight from the control room there that things are getting rather exciting at the Talarico party, I understand. And for obvious reasons, he's in Austin tonight with his supporters, and they're seeing those tallies run up. But as you were saying there, Bethany, can't take anything for granted here, and certainly Crockett's stronghold is going to be in the Dallas area.
Absolutely. So I'm predicting a long night for Texas Democrats.
Let's talk for a moment about controller responsible for managing the state's money. Republican Kelly Hancock, former state senator, became the acting controller in 2025, running to keep that position. But it looks like Don Huffines is rather running away with things. And now, Scott, we were talking a little bit about this before we went live on the air statewide. and that is that Don Huffines ran against Greg Abbott back in, what was it, 2022 or something?
Yeah,
I guess
and
it was.
and in that race in the Republican primary that year, Abbott faced several challengers, including former Senator Huffines, and he smoked them with more than 65% of the vote, something like that. Huffines has been a perennial candidate. He first ran in 2014 successfully for state senator in Dallas. Abbott has sort of made fun of Huffines as saying that he didn't want a Republican nominee who has actually been defeated by a Democrat in the past, which did happen. Senator Nathan Johnson, who's now running for Attorney General on the Democratic side. But Huffines is, I believe this is correct, was born with about $100 million in the bank. He's one of the scions of the Huffines family up in Dallas-Fort Worth. Auto dealers and bankers, and very well-known business family in Dallas. Right. He is, one of those Ron Paul libertarian-style Republicans, and has run for office that way many times. He was Doge, quote, before it was cool. He was in his television ads 10 years ago. He was already taking a flamethrower to government abuse and waste before they ever talked about Elon Musk with the chainsaw and all of that sort of stuff. Right. I'm not surprised at the result that he so far is potentially going to win the nomination with no runoff, but it could be a blessing for Democrats because he's the kind of candidate they want to face in the fall. They can paint him as more extreme.
It was very interesting to see what happened with Don Huffines and the Epstein files. I guess you heard about this. Apparently, there was a ranch in New Mexico that the Huffines purchased, and there's been some talk about that. I don't know where that's headed, but it didn't seem to cost him a whole lot.
David, I want to bring up, I'm just seeing this, our reporter Michael Marks sharing some reporting from Bloomberg Law that Attorney General Ken Paxton is asking the state's high court to strike down the Dallas County order that extended voting hours Tuesday. This is according to a petition reviewed by Bloomberg Law. Of course, it is it's happening right now, right? I mean, the voters are in line.
What would they do? They would have to do
open.
something like if he were successful in something like that, they would have to try to strike all the ballots cast after a certain time. Would that be how they would try to play that out?
I have no idea. This is breaking news information. Yeah, what do you think, Scott?
That's possible. There is some precedent for that in throwing out some ballots if a higher court rules that those are invalid. But they would have to move pretty quick here, and I'm not sure that they will. We'll see if they answer their phones at the state Supreme Court. I would think that if politics played into this, which it might, that Republicans really would rather see Representative Crockett be the Democratic nominee in the fall. So I would be surprised if the Republican Supreme Court stepped in to stop a lot of her voters from weighing in.
We have a lot more ahead this primary election night. Things, as you can hear, continuing to unfold. We've got statewide news just ahead, and we'll also have a check-in at some of those watch parties, including here in Austin with State Senator, with hopeful U.S. Senator, we'll see, James Tallarico. It is live primary election night coverage here on the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice alongside David Brown.
Howdy,
and this election night, you can't just hear us, you can also see us.
If you dare.
We didn't put makeup on, but here we are. Here we are in the Texas Standard studios, and we are live streaming at texasstandard.org. So if you've always wondered, You can take a look there, folks. We are live
Thanks.
coverage.
Thanks a lot.
tonight. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it was a bright idea. It was.
We got some hot political news here, and Wells Dunbar, you were just telling us a little bit about what you're seeing now.
Oh goodness, yeah, a couple interesting U.S. House races I'm keeping an eye on, and this one kind of flew under my radar. Hadn't really been paying too much attention to it. This is the race for Texas House District 2, the U.S. House seat, and a familiar name. In early voting, at least, a familiar name seems to be going down 39 to 57%. I'm talking about Dan Crenshaw.
Wow.
That's the incumbent Republican Congress member, being trounced so far in early voting by one Steve Toth, who was a conservative, very MAGA-aligned conservative with a history in the Texas House, a state representative. Looks like he may level up to the U.S. House of Representatives. So, of course, early voting, want to add all those caveats, but yes, Dan Crenshaw down decisively in early voting. Also waiting for some more numbers to come out here in District 23 in the Republican race there. Of course, this is the one which pits embattled Representative Tony Gonzalez, the incumbent, against Brandon Herrera and a couple other candidates. But those two candidates, Gonzalez and Herrera, really just neck and neck right now. Although, again, another caveat, I should say that there's only about 8,000 votes or so in right now. But Gonzalez leading, just edging Herrera out right now, 4,000 votes to 3,800 votes. Gonzalez, of course, has been in the news a lot lately. This in regards to the suicide death of a former staffer with whom Gonzalez was alleged to be having an affair. There were many calls, some bipartisan calls, in fact, for him to step down. So very early on that, I'm looking at the numbers on the Secretary of State's website, and I don't see a single vote yet from Bexar or Brewster County, so lots more reporting to come in on that race between Herrera, who's a YouTuber, gun rights advocate, versus the incumbent, Tony Gonzalez. So a couple interesting races that we're going to be watching as the night progresses. David.
We should note that all 38 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives are going to be up for grabs in November, and there are several potential candidates who find themselves in heated contests for their party's nomination, especially after redistricting. We have several Texas representatives who are retiring at the end of their term, others leaving to pursue other offices. And, of course, a lot of uncertainty in those districts combined with this redistricting left doors open. Republicans are trying to add to their shallow majority in Washington. Of course, this was something that President Donald Trump was urging Texas Republicans to take on in the last legislative session. Taking a look at where the action is in Houston, District 18, an 11-term Congressman, Al Green, 11 terms, 78 years old. He's running against the man who already holds the redrawn seat, Christian Menifee. This gerrymander wiped out Green's old district, and so now one of them goes home tonight. It's a kind of generational warfare, as it has been cast in some circles. Only one Democrat survives there. South Texas, we have districts 15 and 35, 35th district redrawn into Trump territory. Of course, that was an area that President Trump would have carried by 10 points. The incumbent, Greg Casar, fled to a safer seat. Republicans have a packed field ready to claim it. In the Rio Grande Valley, Democratic hopes in the 15th rest with two-time Latin Grammy Award-winning Tejano singer Bobby Pulido, already a household name in that region, and we're watching that closely. First, of course, Pulido would need to survive a Democratic primary. In Dallas, districts 32 and 33, the 32nd has been stretched from Dallas deep into red East Texas. Democrat Julie Johnson read the map and got out, running instead for the safer 33rd district. And of course, as Wells was just telling us there, District 2, Dan Crenshaw, combat veteran and Republican congressman, battling a primary challenger from his right, Steve Toth, state representative. Crenshaw accused of not being ideologically pure enough for the moment. And once a national GOP star, fighting to prove he still belongs, but at this hour, things are not looking too good for Crenshaw.
Well, we're talking numbers, and you can find them at texasstandard.org/2026 primaries. That's texasstandard.org/2026 primaries. And we know that the senators, hopeful senators on the Democratic side, are watching these numbers come in right now. With the results so far, James Tallarico, according to the Associated Press, leading Jasmine Crockett about 53% to 45%. Blaise Gainey covers politics for the Texas Newsroom, and he is at the watch party for James Tallarico. Blaise, good to have you back.
Yeah, glad to be back on.
All right, we checked in with you a little over an hour ago, and things were just warming up there at Emo's in Austin. How are they looking now?
It is very crowded in here now. I'm not sure if you can hear everybody in the background, but every time something pops on the screen, a different county result pops up with Tallarico ahead, the crowd erupts and cheers. It's gotten definitely more lively than it was earlier.
I mean, at this point, are folks hoping for a straight out win, or are they still going to be happy with runoff territory?
I don't think this is going to go to a runoff, even before I did it, but I think the way their energy is, I think they feel like they've already won.
Well, the big caveat that our in-studio guest was pointing out is that Dallas County has yet to report, and that is deep Jasmine Crockett territory with a lot of voters, big numbers. I think he said something like a fourth of voters.
Something like more than 25% of registered Democratic voters seem to turn out at the polls, at least according to these early numbers. And we don't know for sure what that's going to ultimately be, especially if we're not counting all the votes until 9 o'clock.
Well, and we have had unprecedented turnout, as we've also talked about. So those numbers, that fourth of a vote, will that play out as Democrats across the state have shown up in greater numbers? Blaise, what's the case that supporters of James Tallarico are making that set him apart from Jasmine Crockett?
The biggest thing is his composure. They believe that he's very composed and measured in the way that he talks, and they believe that he can really, and you may hear some cheers in the background as they're showing more results on TV, but they believe that he can really bridge the gap between the Republicans and try to speak to them in a way that may get some to understand and come over and help vote for different sorts of bills that maybe they wouldn't vote for if that was, Jasmine Crockett in that space. And I will say, I spoke with his campaign manager earlier tonight, and he said they are feeling really good so far with the results they've seen.
Well, Blaise Gainey is there at the watch party for James Tallarico. Blaise, I don't know if you heard this. John Cornyn not having a watch party, having a press availability. So this is a very different feel, at least on that part of the Republican side.
Yeah, I think that's just a signal that, they expect a runoff. No reason necessarily to throw a whole party if you're already expecting there to be a runoff. And I believe the numbers sort of look as so it will head to a runoff. I haven't been paying too much close attention to that side, but I know I saw Representative Wesley Hunt with about 13% of the vote earlier. So, just looking at that, it's likely that that'll head to a runoff.
Blaise, thank you so much. Our election primary coverage continues right after this.
You're listening to live primary night coverage from the Texas Standard, and we're talking with reporters statewide. Pretty soon we're going to be hearing more about, I guess, the marquee race of the evening. Bethany Albertson is here in the studio with us. Bethany is associate professor in the Department of Government at UT Austin, and I mentioned that marquee race. I guess it's got to be that Senate race, right?
Absolutely. Right. There's lots of important races happening in Texas, but the competitive primary on both the Republican and the Democratic side has really captured the attention of not just the state, the nation, right? Because we're not used to seeing that. We're not used to seeing two really promising candidates fighting each other for the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, we were saying earlier this evening that when was the last time anyone could remember a competitive Democratic statewide primary, right? And that, you'd have to go way back.
You have to go way, way back. And so Democrats aren't used to having this kind of choice. I told friends I drove by a house the other day that had both a Crockett and a Talrico sign in the yard. And honestly, that echoes a lot of what I've been hearing from Texas Democrats.
Well, see, here's the thing. I can remember when we saw Beto signs all over the state. Everywhere, right? And at the time, there was a lot of talk about this will be the year that Democrats really step it up and they win their first statewide election since, 1996?
Right.
Didn't happen.
Nope.
And I think there were a lot of long faces and people sort of making the joke about this will be the year. Sure, right. And Democrats replying, it's all about the turnout. It's all about the turnout. It's all about the turnout. We're on a primary night here. It's not general election night, so there's that big caveat. And we have two very interesting personalities who have sort of seized the spotlight here in Texas. James Talarico, of course, famously not appearing on the Colbert late night program. And then, of course, that interview goes off to be streamed on YouTube. And he ends up raising $2.5 million right off of that. You have Jasmine Crockett, who's become seen by many on the progressive side as the rising star, but not so much because of her progressive politics, more because of her style, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She distinguishes herself by being a fighter, and she's been a fighter in the House, and we've seen that on committee. And she also portrays that in her events and in her commercials, right? That's part of the message that she's giving us, that she will take the fight to Donald Trump.
Someone needs to look this up, but because I can remember, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I can remember when Jasmine Crockett was a freshman in the Texas State House. We got to find out, because I can remember calling her up and being struck by how candid she was about feeling sort of dismissed as a newcomer to the Texas State House, and she was not going to put up with it. I remember being really struck by her candor and her rapid rise through the ranks now. I mean, if anyone can be seen as a kind of rising star in Texas politics, you got to call it like it is. Jasmine Crockett is certainly that.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you think about what it takes now for a candidate to break through, that ability to get attention, to give us these moments that get shared and reshared and reshared, Crockett's very skilled in that. Talrico is too, right? Talrico, yes, he became more well-known through Colbert, but he was, before that, reaching out to Joe Rogan. He has an active social media presence. He's been also very, very good at winning in the attention economy. And so I think Democrats are a little spoiled, and you're not used to saying that about Texas Democrats.
Okay, well, let me just throw out, I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but given the turnout that we have seen, could this be the year? Certainly Democrats have got to feel energized. What with a special election, yeah, you knew I was going to ask about this, but there was a special election in Tarrant County that no one saw coming. Tarrant County, deep red, Trump country, and the Democrat in that special election wins by 17 points. Republicans saw it coming in the final hours, and they freaked out. They said, listen, guys, we're going to have to get our act together if we're going to pull it off in the general election. That was the early call. Now we're seeing Democrats coming out perhaps in historic numbers before the end of this evening who are casting ballots in a statewide Senate race.
Mm-hmm.
That's saying something.
It is. It is. The smart money in Texas is always going to be on saying the Republican is going to win, right? And the truth is it'll flip one day, but we won't know it until we see it. If I want to build up that case, I would point out, wow, Beto came within less than 3 percentage points.
Yeah.
And the current sitting president is really unpopular.
Some stations are going to cut away for some local political coverage. You are listening to special coverage of primary night in Texas from the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown with Laura Rice, and we are covering this primary night. We've seen a lot of very interesting things. We saw Ken Paxton now apparently filing a lawsuit. He's trying to get the votes that were, I guess, the extension to 9 o'clock in Dallas County invalidated. Is that what you understand, Laura?
That is what I believe I'm reading here from Ryan Otuyo, who is a reporter with Bloomberg Law. Check in here. I've not been on X as much lately, so I'm refreshing the page here to see if there is an update. But yeah, the idea was that voting in Dallas County was extended to 9 p.m. because Dallas County was one of the few in the state to, the Republican Party requested that primary election day voting happen at your assigned precinct only. This only happened in a couple of counties, also happened in Williamson County here in Central Texas. But in Dallas County, this created a lot of confusion. There was a last-minute lawsuit, and a judge there apparently ruled we're going to extend voting until 9 o'clock. But we heard reporting, 9 o'clock Central Time, but we're hearing reporting from, again, Bloomberg News that Attorney General Ken Paxton is asking the state's high court to strike down that order extending voting hours Tuesday. And apparently there is some precedent for this, that any votes cast after a certain time might not be counted, but we haven't had an update on this yet.
No, and we should also mention those of you in the El Paso area, if you're standing in line by the time the polls close, they're gonna let you go ahead and cast your ballot. Well, here we are coming up on what is 7:47 Mountain Time. Looks like you've got about 13 minutes to make it down to the polls, because the judge there in El Paso has extended voting there as well. Angela Kucherga, the news director at KTEP and co-host here at the Texas Standard, telling us that a little less than an hour or so ago. So voting has been extended in several places here in Texas. I was trying to think of what the headline is going to be in tomorrow's papers. Of course, there's going to be the winners of the respective party races in the U.S. Senate. Of course, it's going to be Crockett or Tallarico, and it looks likely that we'll be looking at a runoff on the Republican side. But there's so much more that we could talk about. Bethany Albertson, associate professor, Department of Government at UT Austin. If you had to write the headline for tomorrow, what's that going to be? Is it going to, other than the Senate race, what would you say?
I guess I would write a headline about an energized Democratic Party and a question about what's happening with the Republicans.
Very, very interesting questions indeed. We are coming up on 49 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. There's a whole lot more of our live coverage statewide on this primary night. I'm David Brown along with Laura Rice, and you don't want to touch that dial. It's just getting very exciting, so stay with us. More coverage just ahead.
This is live primary election night coverage on the Texas Standard and live at texasstandard.org. I'm Laura Rice alongside David Brown, and we are turning now to another guest, Gabby Birnbaum, the Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune. Gabby, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Well, what are the most consequential House races that you're watching on the ballot across Texas tonight?
Yeah, I would say number one, there's 4 incumbents who are at pretty serious risk of losing, starting with Dan Crenshaw, Republican in the Houston area. He's down with early vote in Harris and Montgomery County to Steve Toth, who's one of the most conservative state reps. That's looking pretty good for Toth. And then also on the Republican side, the Tony Gonzalez, Brandon Herrera race in West Texas, San Antonio. That's, obviously hot button because Gonzalez has just, reports of this alleged affair between him and a staffer who ended up dying by suicide have come out recently. So that's something people are closely watching. His opponent there also very far right. And then on the Democratic side, you've got a member-on-member primary in Houston between Al Green and Christian Menefee. We've got results in Harris and Fort Bend early, and Menefee's leading. And then lastly, this one we don't have anything yet, but in Dallas, bit of a rare situation. We have the current representative, Julie Johnson, against her immediate predecessor, Colin Allred, who dropped out of the Senate race in December and switched to this House seat, which is sort of a version of both the House seat that both Johnson currently represents and Allred used to represent. So those are 4 that incumbents are in serious danger and could see a lot of change coming to the delegation.
I mean, are we talking about straight out losses in the primary, or does it look like runoffs at this point, or is it still too close to call in some of these cases?
Yeah, I think still too close to call in some of them. I think certainly with Crenshaw and Toth, because there's only 2 other candidates and both are, under 3%, under 2%, I think. That one could be ended tonight. I wouldn't be surprised. And then Green and Menefee too. I think Menefee's hovering around 50%. But there's more outstanding vote in Harris County where he's done better than in Fort Bend County. So I could see that one ending tonight as well.
Gabby, this is David Brown here with Laura Rice. I just have a quick question. This has to do with your perspective there in Washington reporting for the Texas Tribune. And I know that Senate race has gotten the lion's share of attention on the national level, but given that President Trump sort of set off a sort of national redistricting war last year, how closely are people in Washington watching what's happening in Texas tonight?
Oh, very closely, very closely. And I think actually, ironically, Senator Cornyn is probably following it extremely closely because he's made the case that he at the top of the ticket is better positioned to carry these Republicans in these House seats that were redrawn. 3 of them are Trump plus 10. So those are going to be pretty competitive. And so Republicans are Trump has endorsed in all 5. He certainly has his preferred candidates, but that's something that the White House is very invested in getting those candidates that they want across the finish line.
We've been trying to think about, okay, so what's the headline tomorrow morning? And again, it may be too early to know. And of course, one headline is certainly going to be the outcome of the Democratic and Republican primaries in that U.S. Senate race. But I think a lot of people wondering just what President Trump's coattails are, if they've been clipped a bit by what's been going on at the international and national level, what's happening in Iran right now, with the enforcement of immigration laws. So is this seen as a test for President Trump in the general, or not so much?
I think, yeah, it's certainly a test of the strength of his endorsement, which is still, the most powerful endorsement in politics, particularly in those seats, open seats or redistricted seats. We can really see, did the Trump candidate win outright? Did they go to a runoff? And how do they do in those runoffs? So, for example, in Texas 35, just as I'm looking at it, that's one outside of San Antonio. Trump's endorsed candidate is currently in second. Now we still need election day vote. And that looks like it's almost certainly headed to a runoff. But those are the kind of races where we can see. Then on the other hand, in the Crenshaw race, Crenshaw was the only House Republican from Texas that Trump didn't endorse. And as you can see, it looks like he might be going down. And so I think that's evidence still of, how powerful that Trump endorsement or lack of Trump endorsement is.
Gabby Birnbaum is the Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune. Gabby, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. And Wells Dunbar is our audience and engagement editor. He's also pushing some fancy buttons tonight, making a camera in here that kind of looks like Wall-E, go back and forth. And
the biggest irony is, I'm punching all the buttons, but I'm not even on the camera. Here,
Dude,
I'll give you the button.
Scroll
so
it
maybe
around?
you can put it on me there on
operate
Texas.
this. Oh, this is
You're
there we go.
getting it.
Okay.
Folks, if you're not watching this on
Oh,
YouTube,
I went
you're
too
missing
far.
quite a
I
bit.
don't have the screen in front of me. How's that?
there we go.
I'm
Yeah.
edging over.
Let me
There we
tilt
go.
that
Here we
over
go. Oh,
there.
nope, too far.
First
Too far.
foray into broadcast television, y'all. And what fun it is.
It really, it came together pretty nicely over the course of the last
much
24
headroom.
hours here. But yeah, tons of reactions out there. We've been the big story, one of the big stories tonight, this story out of Dallas, the extended early voting hours. I'm looking on Blue Sky and I see a message really just sort of putting a personal spin on what this has played out like for one voter. Blake here on Blue Sky says that he voted in Dallas County today. The Texas.gov site wouldn't tell me where to go, so I went to where I voted in the 24 presidential election. They said I was at the wrong place and gave me the address I needed to go to. Then that place informed me I had to go somewhere else. So again, just this decision, I suppose, on the part of the Republican primary to have these specific polling locations really wreaking havoc. And of the big story, another big story, the fact that these extended voting hours in Dallas may have an impact on those races up there. So definitely, it's going to be fascinating to see how that one plays out. Our friends at Texas Public Radio, they're covering a story with a familiar name that's flown under the radar because it is a local race, but a familiar name nonetheless. That'd be one Ron Nierenberg, former San Antonio mayor. Looks like he is going to be making it there with 62% of the vote for. Oh my gosh, I don't even have the office in front of me. But looking for a county report. Bexar County judge. Bexar County judge
There
primary.
you go. All right.
So familiar name there in Alamo City politics coming back. Another name that folks are probably familiar with, John Carter. He would be the Republican U.S. representative for Texas 31st Congressional District there north of Central Texas, stretching up into the Dallas suburbs. Crazy race there. He's running away with it with 54%, but there are 10 Republican candidates in that race.
Wow.
So he's trouncing everyone. And there really has been just a crazy assortment of folks. We saw one candidate, what's his name here? He wanted to have the word ShamWow in his on the voting guide because he was a infomercial pitchman for the ShamWow. That would be a one. Offer Shalomi. He came in with 4%. Another person, Valentina Gomez, she's in third place with 8.5%. She made waves, disowned by many on the Republican Party for just virulent anti-gay, anti-Muslim rhetoric. But John Carter running away with that one, nearly 60% now.
Audience engagement editor Wells Dunbar watching what Texans are saying this primary night, and the night is far from done. Alas, we're going to have to call it quits, at least on the air. But the news continues right here on this station. Don't touch that dial. I'm David Brown alongside Laura Rice, and our big thanks to our in-studio guests tonight. We're going to have more election coverage coming up. Just keep it right here.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington Foundation.